you guys, welcome to our live crochet event. My name is Brenda KB Anderson, and today I am going to be showing you how to make the Homestead Fingerless Mittens. So this is what they look like. They're very cute, they look a little patchworky, they kind of have that granny square look to them, but this is actually more of a cousin to the granny square. It's called the linen stitch square that we're using here. So I'm going to be walking you through all the steps on how to make these mitts today. So that's going to be fun. It's a really great project to make, for fall. And then I actually wear fingerless mittens in the winter too. Sometimes I layer them over thinner gloves. Sometimes I just keep them in my car, in case you need that extra warmth and you forgot you ran out of the house without your mittens on, and then you got something in your car, right? So it's always nice to have an extra pair of these fingerless mittens around. The thing I really love about fingerless mittens is that you still have all the dexterity of your fingers, and even in the winter when you're wearing those thinner gloves under, you can still do a lot of things with your fingers that you wouldn't normally be able to do with the thicker mittens. So I really like having pairs of these around. They're very practical in my life, but they're also really beautiful. And also another thing about this project that I absolutely love, if you guys have watched my other tutorials before, you know how much I love scrappy projects. I save all my yarn scraps, even little tiny ones like this size, because I can use them in really beautiful projects like this, where you add a little bit of color. I just absolutely love mixing colors together. I just love that you can take all these scraps that would otherwise, be seen as not useful or be thrown away, and you can make something really, really beautiful with them. And so, of course, I save all my scraps, and then I design projects like this so that I can use them up. All right, very excited to show this to you guys today. This is a live event, so if you guys have any questions about what I'm doing, if you have any comments, also if you just want to say hi and tell me where you're crocheting from or what you're working on, if you have any suggestions for future projects, I love that when you guys drop these things in the chat, and I will get to them during the live event. So please say hello to me. And I see that Diane's already saying good morning to all of us. Hi, Diane. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the materials that we need. I made these mitts with worsted weight yarn, which is a number 4. But the worsted weight yarn that I use is just a little tiny bit thinner than some other worsted weight yarns that I've used. So I just want to put that out there in case you have a lot of that thicker worsted weight, which is kind of more of an Aran weight yarn. You can definitely use that, but you may need to kind of mix that in with some thinner yarns. This project actually works really great if you're mixing worsted weight yarns together with DK weight yarns. Those are number 3s. So number 3s and number 4s together. It works really great for that. You can have some slightly thicker ones, some slightly thinner ones. It all kind of balances out. It's just a really great place to be using up those scraps because you don't have to be super specific about if they're all exactly the same weight or not. So that's kind of fun. But this is a very slightly thinner number 4 weight yarn. So if all you have is the thicker, like an Aran weight yarn, if that's all you have, that's okay. It'll still work. Maybe you can think about doing one less round in the linen stitch square if it's already meeting the size that it's supposed to be. When you're one round short, if that makes sense, just stop a little bit early. You'll see as we work on this on the process through the making of the mitten, you'll understand that a little bit more later. But it's just something to think about if you only have thicker yarn. I'm using 100% wool, and I'm using a mixture of superwash and non-superwash because that's just what I had. I'm using up my scraps, and that's perfectly fine to do. You just know that when you launder it or wash it, you're not going to be able to throw it in the washing machine if it's not all superwash. So otherwise it will felt. So you can certainly substitute with something else. You can substitute with acrylics. That makes a great substitution, or some other, acrylic wool blends are great, or alpaca is another great substitution as well. You just want to find something that is not very stiff. So cotton yarns might be a little bit tricky for this type of project. Also, they're probably not going to be as warm, so it's something to think about. Not to say that you couldn't make these out of cotton. You can, but just do a little gauge swatch and feel the fabric and then decide if that's right for your project or not. All right, so the download, you can find the link for the download in the description. It's also, I think it's in the chat as well, so go ahead and download that. That's free for everybody, so you can follow along. That will also be available after the live streaming event as well, so you don't need to worry. If you just want to watch, that's fine too. You can always download it later. But it is helpful to have all that because it's got all the information, as well as some pictures. And it's got a chart too, if you're a chart person. I made a chart of the linen stitch square part of it. So if you're a more visual learner, that may be beneficial for you to have that. And good morning, Renee in Texas. I'm glad you're here. And Cheryl Lee, good morning from Maryland. Hi, Cheryl. Thanks for being here. And Julie says hi from Alabama. Hi, Julie. Thanks, you guys, for saying hi. All right, so we talked a little about the yarn. We're going to be needing the main color, which is the color that I put on the back of the mitt here. Actually, let me show you what these look like on so you guys can see. So they're nice and stretchy. They fit really great. And the way that you can customize this for larger hands and arms is you just do more rows, because this part is made back and forth and turn rows in this direction. So you just add more here. This part remains the same regardless of the size that you're making. And as you might notice, these squares, the ones near my fingertip and near my arm edge here, these are slightly larger than this square. This square has one fewer round in it, and the reason that I did that was so that it has that little bit of shaping where your wrist is, and it just helps your fingerless mitt not feel like it's going to slip off. I just like them to feel snug and like they're going to stay in place. If I'm running around doing stuff, I don't want to have to keep tugging them up. So, so that's why this is a little bit smaller. It's for shaping purposes, but they're very, very easy. This is actually a great project for somebody who's just kind of starting out. Once you've done like maybe a dishcloth or a couple of swatches or something like that, you'd be able to tackle this project. It's very straightforward. You'll see. Okay, so you're going to need a main color, so you'll need somewhere between, let's see, about 110 yards up to 130 yards, just depending on what size you're making, how wide this section is going to be. And then for all the other colors, there are 6 colors in my mitt, but that can vary just depending on what you have on hand. But I use 6 colors, and I needed about like 10 or 15 yards of each of those 6 colors. But if you're only doing this in 2 colors, you're going to need more yardage of those 2 colors to make up for that, if that makes sense. But that's just to give you kind of a ballpark idea of what you're going to be needing. And all the information for exactly what I use, the yarn, the color, the brand, everything, that's all in your download. So if you're curious about that, you can check that out. You're also going to be needing 2 crochet hooks actually for this project. So 1 crochet hook, the larger of the 2, I'm using a G, which is a 4mm hook, and I'm using that for the linen stitch squares. And then after you've completed the linen stitch squares and you start working on this ribbing, then you're going to switch to a slightly smaller hook. And the reason is I wanted this fabric to be very dense, and also to match up with the number of stitches that we have going on here from the linen stitch. If that doesn't make sense to you, it doesn't really make a difference, but once we're working on this, I'll explain when to switch your hook size. So yeah, you're going to need 2 hooks. So the smaller of the 2 hooks is an F, which is a 3.75mm hook, and again, that's just used for this main color section for that ribbing that goes across the palm of the hand. All right, so you'll also need, you can use a locking stitch marker to help you out to keep your place in your square if it's helpful, but that's very optional. You also might want it just to mark the ends of your rows going back and forth if you're a little bit newer to crocheting, just so that you have a neat and tidy edge and you're always, you're not missing any stitches or adding any stitches. You might use locking stitch markers for that, but that's pretty optional. And then you're going to need a yarn needle. So there aren't a lot of supplies here, and hopefully you'll find most of the yarn already in your stash. So this will be a fun one. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to start out by talking you through the linen stitch square. But first, I just want to mention for the gauge, if you're newer to crochet and you're like, what's this thing about the gauge? What that means is I'm telling you to work through round 5 of the directions, which is round 5 of making the linen stitch square. So you'll have this little square that looks like this, and then you're going to measure it across and see how it compares to what I have listed in the pattern. And the reason that this matters is that if your square is bigger, you're crocheting at a slightly looser gauge than I'm crocheting at. That doesn't mean that it's wrong, but what that means is if you just continued with that hook size, that your mitts are going to be larger than you think that they're going to turn out. Okay, so and when you make that linen stitch square, be sure to measure it to know if your mitt is going to turn out the size that I say it will turn out in the pattern. If your square ends up too big compared to my square, then you can do your linen stitch square again with a smaller hook. If it ends up too small, you can try it again with larger hook. You know, that way you can, once you match my gauge and you're able to get a square that's the same size as mine, then when you crochet everything up, then it's going to turn out the size that I say it will in the pattern and it'll fit your hands. So that's why we check our gauge. Let's see. Yeah, I think that was all my special notes that I had for you. So I think we can just go ahead and start. Oh, one additional thing, I forgot to mention this. In the pattern, I do actually tell you what order to use these colors in if you choose to make this with 6 contrast colors like I did. So I used 1 main color here and then 6 different contrasting colors here. I actually do have a little list here of what order I used my colors in. So if you wanted to make exactly these mitts with the same color changes that I have, or if you're finding colors to substitute for my colors and you don't want to think about when you're making your squares how they're going to look next to each other and if they're going to look, you know, kind of nice and random, like how I planned them, then you can go by my list if you want to. So you can use them in the same order that I did. But don't feel like you need to do this. You could do, you know, say you wanted to make a pair of black and white mitts and you just had black and white, you could just alternate black and white and black and white and black and white. That would be really cool. You know, use this as a jumping off point and, you know, definitely use what you have on hand and kind of decide if you like things to be in a regular pattern, you know, matching, you know, so the 2 mitts match each other. Mine do not. You can see they coordinate, but they're not exactly the same. You know, those are just all things to think about. But if you do want them to look like my sample here, I've got the little map of where I used each color here in the pattern, so you don't have to think about it if you don't want to. All right, so all of the directions are written out in the pattern. So here, you know, there's a whole section where everything is completely written out if you are someone who does better with, you know, written out patterns. I'm going to be teaching off of this chart because it just helps me. I'm not very good at reading words while I'm talking, so that's why I'm going to be looking at this picture, and then I'm going to be talking you through how to create these squares. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to start out. I'm going to be making start off making this square here with these color changes here. So I'll set that to the side so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to start with that light green color. And I'm going to begin by making an adjustable loop. So let's see. Okay, the way that I make my adjustable loops is I draw like a little loop like this, and then I flip over that loop onto the strand of yarn connected to my ball, like that. Then I place my hook, and I'm using my larger hook here because that's what I use for the linen stitch squares. I'm going to place that underneath that strand in the middle. And then I'm gonna pull this just a little tighter. I'm just pulling on this to tighten that loop a little. And then I'm gonna chain 1 right here. And then I'm going to flip my loop over like this. And then I'm gonna start crocheting around here. Now, if you have a different way to make your adjustable loop, that's absolutely fine. You can do it however you like. That's just how I make mine. All right, so I'm gonna start out with round number 1. We'll bring in our chart here so you can see. We're starting here with round number 1, and we're going to do a single crochet, that's the little plus sign, and then the chain, which is that little oval, and then a single crochet, and then 2 chains. So single crochet, chain, single crochet, 2 chains. All right, so here's our first single crochet. We're just working into that loop. We insert, here, let me back up. We insert yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. And we're going to chain 1, then we're going to single crochet in that same space again, and then we're going to chain 2. Chain 1, chain 2. Okay, so we've worked to here. Now we're going to repeat that a couple more times. Okay, so 2 more times to make those next 2 corners. So single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, chain 2. Let's do that again. Single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, and chain 2. Okay, and here is our last. I'm going to just pull that a little tighter. So see how it's making that square shape already? You can see those corners. Now we're on our last side of the square. So we're going to single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, and then instead of chaining 2, I'm going to join by using a half double crochet into that very first single crochet that we made, which is right there. So to do that, I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to insert into that very first stitch that we made, that first single crochet, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 3. That half double crochet is going to count as that chain 2 and a slip stitch kind of all together, that we're doing that instead of the traditional slip stitch join at the end of the round. And let me tell you why I'm doing that. The reason why is because then our hook ends up right here, our working loop ends up right there at the corner instead of over here. And the great thing about that is if you wanted to make linen stitch squares in one color only, just keep going with one solid color, because you can definitely make these mitts out of one color or a variegated yarn or, long striping ombre yarn. It could be really fun. Then you're already at the corner, and then on the next round you can just start working into that corner. That's why I'm doing this. It doesn't matter so much exactly where you fasten off when you're changing colors every single round, but especially lately, I have been switching to this kind of join at the end of my granny squares and all that, because I like to have that option in case I want to do another round in the same color. I'm already at that corner. All right, so then when you've finished your half double crochet, you can just cut your yarn and fasten that off. Just draw that through and pull it tight. Okay, and you might be thinking, hey, it's driving me crazy that you're not tightening that loop at the middle, Brenda. Why aren't you doing that? So right now I'm waiting until after I do the next round to tighten that loop, and the reason why is because it's very difficult to see your stitches in that first round once you tighten that loop. They get all crammed together. It's hard to get your hook in there, and it's hard to tell what you're looking at. So I just leave this open like that until after I finish the next round. Okay, so in my linen stitch squares, I will turn them over for the next round. I keep turning them back and forth, and that kind of keeps things even, makes the corners all line up neatly. However, these are very small squares, and if you're like, I'm not going to remember to do that, can't I just keep going with the same side? And you can. Totally, honestly, you could just keep it going with the same side facing the whole time you're making these linen stitch squares. They're small, it's not going to really make a difference. But I like to switch back and forth from one side to the other, so both sides of my linen stitch squares look good. All the corners are lining up very neatly. They don't start to kind of vortex off to the side, so it's just kind of good practice to make them that way. So that's why I'm doing that in this project, even though it's not absolutely necessary. Okay, so this is the wrong side facing up. I always set my piece down with, well, I shouldn't say the wrong side, but the wrong side of the last round is now facing up, so that means I'm going to work into this side. All right, so to begin the next round, I am going to just place a slip knot on my hook, and I'm just going to make a standing single crochet. So that just means I just keep that slip knot on my hook, and I just go ahead and make a single crochet right in that corner where I joined, right where my half double crochet is. So I'm inserting in that corner, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. There's my first single crochet of the round. Then I'm going to chain 1, and now I'm going to place 1 single crochet between these 2 single crochets, and that's really hard to tell where those 2 single crochets are in that very first round. So I like to put my hook where I think it is, and I turn my work over because it's a lot easier to see those 2 single crochets if you're looking at the back side. So I just pop it through, make sure that that's in the right spot, and then I'll go ahead and yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. Then I'm going to chain 1. So far we have that single crochet in the very corner where we started, a chain 1, a single crochet between these 2 single crochets down here. So that was a chain 1 space that we worked into. Then we chained 1. Now we're at the next corner, and we're going to make a single crochet in that corner and a chain 2. Because we're at a corner, we're always going to chain 2 at the corners, and then another single crochet into that same space right there. So you might have noticed we're not actually working into any of those single crochets we made in that first round. We're working in the chain spaces between them. So we're working in the chain 1 spaces between them, but we're also working into those corner chain 2 spaces. All right, so let me just, oh, we've got some more hellos. Lots more hellos. Oh my goodness. Molly's saying hi from St. Paul. Hi, Molly. And we have a good afternoon from Monica in Denmark. Hello. And a hello from Wyoming from Amanda. Good morning, crochet friends. We're thrilled to have you with us today. That's from us. We are thrilled to have you guys here. I'm very excited. I'm always very excited when you guys pop in and say hi. It's so nice to know where everybody is too. We have a hello from Savannah. Hi from Ireland. Good morning from Mexico. And then we have a question from Molly. Is there a place on the Crochet Corner website where people can post pictures of projects so we can see what others have done with your patterns? Yes, there is a project gallery, and we have kind of changed how things are arranged on the website, so I'm not exactly sure. Let's see. I can't remember how I can navigate you, but maybe we can drop in a link to where that's at. But there is a gallery on the Creative Crochet Corner. I think it might be underneath resources, but I'm not 100% sure. But hopefully someone behind the scenes here will drop in a link so that you guys can find that. Okay, so we're continuing around the corner. We're going to chain 1. Okay, so just to recap, we've got single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, chain 2, because we're at a corner, single crochet, chain 1, and now we're going to do another single crochet between these 2 stitches here, between our 2 single crochets. So we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2, make another chain 1. Every time you make a single crochet, you're just going to either chain 1 or chain 2 right after it. And now we have reached that next corner. So we're going to, let's see. Oh, I think I have to move this stitch over just a tiny bit. There we go. That's in the right spot. I kind of split the back of my single crochet when I was working into it. Then we're going to chain 1, and we're going to work a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet into that corner. And continuing around the next side, we're going to place 1 single crochet between the 2 single crochets along that side there that are there. And then a chain 1. Oops, I don't think I chained 1 after that single crochet. Make sure we get that in there. Okay, so that last, we have a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet, and then a chain 1, and then a single crochet here along the side, chain 1, and then at the corner we have a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet, then we're going to chain 1, make a single crochet right along that side in between our, into one of the chain 1 spaces, and then we'll chain 1, and then here's our last, I'm just going to pull this out of the way here. Here is our last corner here, that's where we started. We're going to make a single crochet there. And then we're going to join again with that half double crochet. So we yarn over, insert into that first single crochet, yarn over, pull up loop, yarn over, and pull through 3. So that joins our square. And then we can cut our yarn and pull it through. There we go. So just to take a look at our chart here, we started out on that first round, we did single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, chain 2, because it was a corner. Okay, and then we repeated that around and we ended up with that half double crochet join right here, and then we fastened off. Then on round 2 we started, and you can see on the chart there's this little arrow, and that's showing you which way you go around, just to remind you you're going this way and then you're going this way. Okay, you're not actually crocheting in that direction, it's just that you've turned your work, if that makes sense. So then you're going to single crochet at that corner into that half double crochet join space, so single crochet, and then every time there's a single crochet you can see there's a chain right above it, and you skip the single crochet. Then there's a single crochet worked into that chain space. Here's a single crochet here, so we're going to chain and skip that stitch. Now we're at the corner, so we do a single crochet into the chain space, chain 2, and then another single crochet into that same chain 2 space. Okay, so that's how we're working. We're just working our single crochets into the chain spaces, whether it's a chain 1 space like this, or if there's a chain 2 space, we're working that corner combination there. Okay, so now we're going to turn this over and we are going to work the next round. Actually, at this point, we can tighten up that loop at the beginning. So we're just going to pull on our yarn tail and tighten it up. And it does get a little wavy and weird. You can see it doesn't really want to lay flat. You can make it lay flat, but it does get a little puckery right at the beginning of the square, but that's going to even out as we keep working. So don't worry if that's troubling you. Don't let that bother you. That's how it is. That's just how it is. All right, so our third color, we're going to take a slip knot, add that to our hook, and then we're going to begin in just the same way. So we're going to start right at that half double crochet join. It actually doesn't matter what corner you start in. I just start there because it helps me. You know, I always know where I'm going to start. So we're going to do that single crochet in the corner. Then we chain one, skip over the single crochet here, work a single crochet into that chain one space, chain one, skip that single crochet, make another single crochet into that chain one space, chain one, and now we're at a corner. So we're going to work that corner combination of single crochet, chain two, single crochet. Then we have a chain one, skip the single crochet, make a single crochet into the chain one space, chain one, single crochet, chain one, and there's our chain two corner. So we're going to do our combination. So single crochet, chain two, single crochet, all into that chain two space, chain one. Again, we're not working into the single crochets. We never work into the single crochets in this stitch pattern. We just are always working single crochets into the chain spaces. And then chaining, when we get to the single crochets, we're just chaining to get across it, if that makes sense. So there's our corner space. We're going to do a chain one, skip that single crochet, single crochet into the chain one space, chain one, skip the single crochet, single crochet into the chain one space, chain one, and here we have that very first corner that we started in. We're going to make a single crochet there, and then we're going to make a half double crochet join into that. We're just making a half double crochet into the top of that first single crochet of the round, and then we'll fasten off. All right, so now we have 3 rounds. We're going to flip this over just like that. We're going to start with the next color, which is purple. And you'll start to see the pattern emerging here. What you know, once you start out your square and you've done a couple rounds, you can just keep on going in the pattern. It's very easy. So we're going to start at that corner. We're going to start with a slip knot on our hook, making a single crochet into that corner. Then we're going to chain one, skip the single crochet, work a single crochet into the chain one space, chain one, skip the single crochet into the chain one space, chain one, skip the single crochet, working into that chain one space, we make another single crochet, chain one, single crochet, chain two, single crochet, chain one, and you can see I often will crochet over the strand of yarn from the previous round because that helps cut down on the time it takes to weave in those ends. You know, this project, it only has 6 little squares. It's not terrible to weave in all those ends, and you'll thank yourself later if you do a good job at weaving those ends and they're not popping out as you're wearing them. So, you know, just take your time. Just realize that it is part of the process of working with so many colors like this. You have to do something, but you can cut down on that a little bit by just, you know, crocheting over those yarn tails a ways. I always like to weave in my ends in at least 2 directions though, so I don't really consider that completely woven in. Usually I weave it in the opposite direction after that, even after I've worked over it, just to make it extra secure, but you know, everybody has different methods. All right, so here we are finishing up with that single crochet into that same chain 2 space where we started, and then we're going to end with a half double crochet to join the end of our round, and then we'll cut our yarn and pull that through. All right, so we've already done 4 rounds. So this, we would just continue working in this linen stitch pattern every time, you know, you start at the corner, and as you work your way across the side, you just know when you come up to a single crochet, you make a chain above it, and when you come to a chain 1 space, you make a single crochet into that chain 1 space. So you do that all the way across. There would be your last single crochet worked into that chain 1 space. Then you're at the corner, and then you do that corner combination. So that's always going to be single crochet, chain 2, single crochet into that chain 2 corner. So every time you go around, and then you'll end with that half double crochet join at, you know, at the very last corner to join to the very first single crochet that you made in the round. So it doesn't matter how many rounds you've done, you're just going to continue working in the same way every time. You know, you can turn your work and work on the opposite side. Once you have 5 rounds done, you can go ahead and measure that and then just make sure that you're on track for getting the right gauge. If you didn't get the right gauge, then you can try again with a different size hook, and you've only made one little tiny square, and maybe you can use it for something else. Little coaster perhaps. All right, so let me just check in and see if we have any questions here. Let's see. Is this stitch also known as the moss stitch? Yes. Okay, so there is a funny thing about crochet where there are so many overlapping names. Sometimes it's the very same stitch, but it has 2 different names. And that can be very frustrating because it's just confusing. So some people call this the linen stitch, and some people call this the moss stitch. There is another stitch that I call the moss stitch that's entirely different from this stitch. So that's why I opt for using linen stitch for this particular stitch pattern, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong to call it the moss stitch. So, you know, lots of people call it the moss stitch. So there's a lot of goofy things in crochet that way where things are named 2 different names and it's very confusing. So you just kind of have to look at the stitch pattern and, you know, follow along with the stitch pattern. Don't listen too much to the name. It could mean several different things, but yes. And oftentimes the linen stitch pattern or the moss stitch pattern is oftentimes worked back and forth in turned rows. That's the way you see it a lot of the time. Actually, I did a blog post on the Creative Crochet Corner website about how I love using that for using that stitch pattern when I'm using up scraps of yarn because it blends the colors together so nicely. So I kind of walk you through in that blog post how to choose your colors and what order to put them in. It's kind of like this little sciencey experiment that I did to see if I could use a system to choose my yarn colors. So if you guys are interested in that, you should check it out. If you just go to the website and then go under, I think, resources, and then there's a section for articles or blog posts. You can check that out. All right, let's see. Oh, and Moon Rose is saying hi, all. Hello, welcome. Okay, so once you've gone around 5 rounds, that's all you need for the middle square of the mitt. So let's pull this back in here a minute. So the middle square for each mitt is 5 rounds, so you'll need 2 of those. So 1 here and 1 here. And then if you go around 6 rounds, then that means you've got, you know, one of these squares at the top or the bottom of your mitt. Okay, so you just go ahead and make all 6 of your squares, and then you're gonna seam them together. And at first I was like, oh, should I try to use a seam where you don't see the stitches? And then I thought, no, I actually really am embracing the patchwork kind of look of these mitts. So I went ahead and I just did a whip stitch, which I just love doing anyway. I don't know if you can see it quite as well here because I used a purple color, which is blending in just a little bit. Maybe you can see it better on here. Right there, I just used a whip stitch across. I will demonstrate how I seam them together with this piece here. Actually, I should mention, before you seam your pieces together, go ahead and weave in all your ends. And you can determine at that time when you're weaving in your ends which side of the linen stitch square you like the best, because you flip-flopped back and forth on every square and they look so similar on both sides anyway. It really doesn't matter which side is the right side. You can just look at the square and say, I think this side looks a little better, so then you can weave in your ends on the back side, but really it doesn't make a difference. All right, but you know, if you are somebody who really, really likes things to look exactly the same, maybe just always choose the square. The right side of the square could always be the one where you ended with a right side round. You know, that could be a good way to decide that, or, you know, it's up to you if you want to be consistent. But, you know, it's not a very noticeable thing between the front side and the back side. Okay, so when you're seaming your pieces together, you will just choose in the pattern I use the yarn color that I use for the main color. So whatever you're going to use for the main color of that mitt. I ran out of this lighter color for my later samples, which is what this is. So I'm going to make these mitts, eventually I'm going to finish them. I'm going to make these with a purple background. But just so you know, in the pattern, I am using this same color here, this kind of oatmeal kind of color, to whip stitch my squares together, because that was my main color for these mitts. Okay, so to join a new strand of yarn, you can just kind of pre-weave that in. I like to go back and forth in a couple of directions, and you can't take exactly the same path or it'll just pull right out. So what I mean by that is when I'm going in this direction, I'm not going to go underneath that strand because that's where I just came out. Instead, I'm going to kind of hop over it, and then when I go like this, it's going to catch right there on that loop, and it won't be able to just undo the stitch that I just did. Okay, so we're all anchored here. We're going to come out at the corner, and that is going to be stitched to this side here. And because this has one fewer round in the square, this is one more round, you can't, it's not going to have the same amount of stitches across. So don't even worry about going from stitch to stitch. Just start at your corner, like that, and do a couple of stitches. I'm just going through both loops of each edge here to do my whip stitches. And then you want this to match up, so you can take a stitch marker or you could use a pin and put those two together. Usually it's so small, I just hold it in place, but if you're a little bit newer to seaming things, you may want to use a pin or a stitch marker to lock those two together, so you know by the time you whip stitch all the way across that you're going to have a nice corner there and everything's going to match up how you want it to. And I'm just taking a stitch, one whip stitch in through every stitch. And so there's going to be a couple of stitches from the smaller square that I work through twice, but that's fine, doesn't matter. It doesn't have to look absolutely perfect. Like I said, I'm really embracing that sort of patchwork handmade feel to these mitts, and I just think it looks really beautiful to have that kind of crafty looking, handmade, hand-stitched seam right here. I think it adds to it. If that is not something that you like, if you don't want your seam to show, you could check out the Creative Crochet Corner website for some other ideas on seaming. You could do, you know, something that's completely hidden between the two, and you just see the two edges butting up, like a mattress stitch or something else like that. You know, there's lots of ways to seam things, so you don't have to do it this way. But that's one of the great things about crochet. There's a million different ways to do everything. So you can make it your own and you get to decide how it looks. All right, so now we have a rectangle, and you would do that also for the other mitt. You'd get them all lined up. Make sure that that smaller square is in the middle of the two larger squares, because that's going to be your wrist shaping. And then we are going to start working that ribbed edge. So if you consider this the right side, let's place the right side down on the table, and we're going to hold our rectangle like this so we're ready to work across those edges. So first we're going to work one row. Let's see, we're just going to place a slip knot on our hook, and we're using our smaller of the two hooks now because we're going to start that ribbing. And we are going to just start stitching across this row. So remember, this is the wrong side facing up. Our very first row we do of the ribbing is a wrong side row. Okay, so I'm going to start at the corner where that chain 2 space is, and I'm going to make 2 single crochets. So there's 1 and 2, and then I'm going to skip the single crochet, and in the next chain space I'm going to place 2 single crochets, 1 and 2, skipping the single crochet, making 2 single crochets in the next chain 1 space. So basically all you need to know is you start out with those 2 single crochets in the corner, and every time there is a chain space, you're going to create 2 single crochets into that chain space. Again, we are not working into any of those single crochet stitches. We're just skipping over them. So now we've made it to that corner chain 2 space. And because it's a chain space, we're making 2 single crochets there. Okay? And we've made it to the next chain space right next door, and we're making 2 single crochets there. Okay, and then we're just going to keep going. Making those 2 single crochets into each chain space. Either chain 1 space or chain 2 space, doesn't matter. Still gets 2 single crochets. There we are. Here's our next chain 2 space here. And we are almost to our last corner of the rectangle here. Well, our next corner, I should say. So there's our corner. That's the chain 2 space, and we're going to end with 2 single crochets into that chain 2 space, and then we are going to fasten off. And that might be kind of a surprise, because you might be thinking, why aren't we just continuing and making our ribbing? So we start off by just making this 1 row, and that is to kind of make things blend in later when we make our seam between the beginning and the end of our ribbing, because when we look at this, we want all these stitches that go into our linen stitch squares to look the same on both sides of the square. So that's why we're doing that. So we're just gonna zip across, fasten off, then we're gonna rotate this 180 degrees. We still have the wrong side of our rectangle facing up. Then we are going to repeat that whole process where we start with a slip knot and work 2 single crochets into each chain 1 space all the way across, and then do not fasten off at the end. And let me show you what that looks like. So we have already done that here. I have the wrong side of my piece facing up. This was the right side. There's the wrong side. We have just worked our second edging across. And at this point, we are going to chain 1 and turn our work like we're turning a page in a book. And now we're going to start working back and forth in turn rows. So at this point, we're going to start making a ribbed fabric, and in order to make it a little bit more stretchy and to have that kind of ribbed texture where you see all those little grooves, that means we're going to be working underneath the back loop of our stitches. So if you take a look at the top edge of your work, you see all these little V's. So there's a bunch of little V's that are all stacked up in this direction, kind of nesting into each other when you look at the very edge of this fabric here. So normally we work underneath both legs of the V, so under the front loop, under the back loop, like that. But now we're going to be working under just the back loop. So we're skipping over that front loop and placing our hook right there. So we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. That's our first single crochet of the row. And we're going to continue that all the way across. So you're just inserting your hook underneath that back loop and making your single crochet into the back loop. That leaves the front loop free, so that's what gives it that ridged appearance, but it also creates a stretchier fabric. So we're just going to continue working back and forth in those turned rows and creating this ribbing. Okay, so we would just keep working all the way to the end. We would chain 1 and turn, and work back in this direction. So we're going to work, so this was row number 1 of this side of the mitt, the very first row here. Now I'm currently working on row number 2, so that's worked through the back loop, row number 2. Then we would get to the end and then work row number 3, and we would end up over here again working into that back loop. So after we have worked those 3 rows, then we're ready to make a thumb hole. So let me show you what that looks like here. Here we have, now we're back to the same colors I used in the sample. Maybe you can see this a little better because it's lighter. But we've already worked 1 row here, 2nd row is here. It's kind of hard to see because it's mostly seen from the other side. And here's the 3rd row right there. Okay, so we've just ended at the end of the 3rd row here, and we're going to start the 4th row. So we're going to chain 1 and turn. And again, we're still working in the back loop only as we work across. So depending on whether we're making a right hand mitt or a left hand mitt, we're either going to put the thumb hole over here or we're going to put the thumb hole over here. Because if you think about it, if this was for my right hand, you'd want the thumb hole pretty close to this edge. But this is the same side up, I'll just rotate it. If this was for my left hand, you would want the thumb hole over here. So we're still putting the thumb hole in the 4th row, regardless of which hand you're making. It's just whether you put it towards the beginning of the row or towards the end of the row. That's what makes it a right hand mitt or a left hand mitt. All right, so let me see, I'm going to follow the directions for my size. This is where the sizing starts to change a little bit because you'll need a larger thumb hole if you have a larger hand and mitten. Let me see. Let's see here. Whoops. Okay, here we are. So we're on the 2nd edge. So the edge meaning this was the first edge that we stitched. Here's the 2nd edge, and we've already worked up through row number 3. We're working on row number 4. This is written out right here for the right mitt. So you can see the heading up here. We'll do the right mitt right now, but then I'm just going to explain the difference between the right mitt and the left mitt as I'm doing this. All right, so we're going to start again. We're skipping that turning chain. We're never going to work into that turning chain on the end, and we're going to begin by working into that back loop of that next stitch. So we're making a single crochet there, and we're going to be making, let's see, okay, so 9 back loop into the next 9 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then we're going to chain 6 for my size. So my size is here in front of the parentheses. For the larger sizes, you'll either, for the larger 2 sizes, you would chain 7. So for me, I'm chaining 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And that's going to allow us to hop over some stitches. So we're going to skip the same amount of stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then there's the next stitch. So we're going to make a single crochet there. Okay, so we've just made this little kind of bridge across, and then we would continue working in that back loop all the way across to the end. So if you were making the left mitt, so this is for the right mitt, see I can put my thumb through there. If this was for the left mitt, you would work more stitches over to here. You would work, let me just check that out here. The left mitt, row number 4, you would work either 31 stitches or 30 stitches for those 2 larger sizes. Then you would chain either 6 stitches or 7 stitches and skip over the same amount, and then you would single crochet through the back loop and the remaining number of stitches. So you'd be putting your thumb hole over here. Okay, and then after you make that thumb hole, they're exactly the same. You just keep working back and forth in turned rows. Actually, let's just imagine I worked all the way down here and I turned around and was coming back this way. So you wouldn't turn around right here, you'd work all the way to the end, but just so that this is a little quicker. You would just be on your next row, you'd be working those single crochets through that back loop, And then you get all the way up to that little chain space. So there's my last single crochet, and here's our chain space. You just continue working underneath the back loop. So when you're looking at the chain, you're just working underneath the back part of that chain. Not the bottom under here, but just when you look at that V, you'd go under the leg of the V that's further away from you. Okay, so you just do that across till you get to the other end of your thumb, and then go back into just working that back loop in those single crochet stitches. Okay, so your piece, I mean, obviously you wouldn't have this little thing here. You would have gone all the way down and back, but that just got you right back into the stitch pattern, and you'd work back and forth, working into that back loop, and then your piece would look like this. Oops. Okay, so this one, I actually made this one to be a left mitt. You can see the hole is down here, so that's going to be our left mitt. We have extended that by making numerous rows here. You just have to follow the pattern to know how many rows to make, but you could also try it on your hand. So especially if your gauge is not exactly turning out like mine, you can go ahead and try it on. And you do want it to have to stretch a little bit in order to connect, because that's going to make it feel nice and snug, but you know, that's up to you how much you want it to stretch. So you can also change that, of course. You're your own crochet boss. All right, so we have finished, let's see, how many rounds is that, or rows is that, 22? Yeah, so row 22, for the smallest size, that's how many we complete, and then we're going to chain one, just like we're gonna work another row, and then we're gonna turn our work, like as if we're gonna work back again, and then we're gonna put the right sides together. So this, if you look at your seaming, you can tell that this is the wrong side facing up. That's the right side. So we're folding the right side in, and then we're gonna slip stitch that edge together through that back loop of each layer. Okay, so here is the back loop of the layer in front. Here is the back loop of the layer in back. That was that one row that we did. We stitched and then we fastened off. So we're just gonna grab the yarn, pull through both those stitches, and pull through the loop on our hook. So again, inserting through that back loop of the next stitch behind, grab the yarn, pull through both stitches and through the loop on our hook. So this is how we're gonna seam this together. You could, if you don't like doing this, you could of course, just fasten off with a long yarn tail, and you could do a whip stitch to seam this together if that's easier, or you like how that looks better. It's totally up to you. But this is the point where we're gonna turn our mitt into a tube, so it's a wearable. And then we're just gonna do a couple of rounds just to finish off the edges of the finger edge and also the wrist edge. There we are. I'm curious if anyone wants to pipe in about whether you prefer to seam your pieces together with crochet like we're doing here, or whether you prefer to do another kind of sewn seam, like a whip stitch or mattress stitch or something like that. I'm curious what other people like to do. I switch off how I connect things, and sometimes it's just like the mood that I'm in, but sometimes it has to do with how stretchy I want that to be, or also it could be what I want it to look like when it's done. There's lots of different reasons to choose a different seaming technique, but I'm just curious what other people enjoy doing the most. So if you guys want to drop that in the comments, that would be interesting for me to know. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this already, but I really love it when if you guys have suggestions of projects to make. I love it when you guys put that in the comments section as well, because I like to design. I love designing things, and I come up with all kinds of different things I can make. But sometimes it really helps me just to have somebody else's perspective just kind of thrown at me, and then I get inspired by something that they want to make, and then it makes me think outside of my normal box of things, So I love that when you guys do that. Moonrose Crafts says, let's see if I was doing something like that in the granny square. I put 4 in the same loop to give it the extra sharp corner look. Does that affect the shape of it? I wonder if you're asking if we're putting, instead of doing a chain 2, let's see if I was doing something like that in the granny square. I put 4 in the same loop to give it the extra sharp corner look. Does that affect the shape of it? Okay, so I'm guessing you're talking about putting, instead of doing a single crochet, chain 2 single crochet at the corner, maybe you're thinking of doing 4 single crochets at the corner instead. Let's see, Moonrose Crafts, if you want to hop back in and clarify just a little bit what you mean, you could try that. I've never done that, but that would be the same number of stitches, but then you would have to work into those single crochets instead of into your chain 2 space at the corner. So I'm not real sure. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying. Okay, so I've made it all the way across. So at this point, we are going to go ahead and turn our mitt right side out. So I'm just going to put my thumbs on the inside and feed this through like this. Like that. There we have it. And then you can go ahead and try it on before you do your edging just to make sure everything works. It probably will look kind of skinny to you at first, but it really does stretch out nicely when you put it on and it stays nice and snug. It's, you know, but this is a good time to check because, and here's the other bonus about, this is actually one of the main reasons I like to crochet my last seam there, is because then you can try it on, you can feel how it's really going to feel, and then if you're like, ooh, I really wish it was a little bigger, or ooh, I really wish it was a little smaller, you can just pull that out and undo that seam in just like 1 second, and then you can either undo some rows if you felt like it was too big, or you can add some rows there if you felt like it was too small. So if you're going to be messing around with how many rows you're going to have, just make sure you do that in groups of 2. So add 2 on, or 2 or 4 or 6, just groups of 2, or you know, you can subtract even number of rows as well. All right, so I'm going to chain 1 here just to give me a little bit of room, and I'm going to turn my work so that I can start working around the edge of it. So regardless of whether you ended up at the arm edge or the finger edge, these edging rounds are worked the same, but know that you can alter this if you like. If you feel like this needs to be really stretchy, like if your arm gets wider quicker here, you could add more stitches around than what I'm going to show you. Just keep that in mind. You don't have to do exactly as the pattern says, of course. You can definitely modify this if you need to make it fit well. Okay, so we're going to do single crochets all around the edge, and we're just going to place a single crochet right here into the side of this edging here, into the side of that row. So there's our first single crochet. And now we've gotten to the linen stitch section, and we're going to put 2 single crochets into this chain 2 corner here. So 1 and 2. And then we get to the next chain 1 space, because we're skipping all those single crochets. We're never going to work into those. On the next one, we're just going to place 1 single crochet. But like I said, if you need this to be a wider circumference here, you can put 2 to allow it to stretch more. Then in the next chain 1 space, we're going to do 2 single crochets, 1 and 2. And in the following one, we'll just do 1. And the next one we'll do 2, 1 and 2, and the following one we'll just do 1. And we'll do 2 here. And we've reached that corner, so I like to do 2 single crochets right here. And then we have gotten to the edges of our ribbing. So I'm going to go ahead and do 1 single crochet into each row end. So if you're not sure what a row end is when you're looking at this ridge right here this is a row, and then this little tiny valley here right there is a row. You can't see it as well. Most of it's covered up. If you stretch it out, you can see it a little better. That's a row right there. This is a row. Between my thumbs is a row. That's a row. That's a row. So that's how to find your row ends. So here we go. We're going to do a single crochet here. and a single crochet into that little valley, single crochet here into the peak. I always think of this as being like peaks and valleys as I work my way around here. And if you're finding that this is making the edge of your mitt ripple, you know, and get kind of stretched out, you could go down a hook size, or you could do fewer stitches if you wanted to. Either way, I would probably opt for a smaller hook size if it's just a little, because it looks a little bit neater if you can always be consistently going into each row end instead of every once in a while skipping a row end. It just looks a little bit more uniform if you can work into all of them. But if you go down a hook size, it'll tighten that up a little bit for you. If you find that as you're working your way around, it's kind of constricting your work and bringing it in and it's not allowing it to stretch enough, you can certainly add more stitches, or you could go up a hook size, you know, either way. So that should help. All right, we have almost made it to the end here. There's our last peak, and here's our last valley before where we started. And then if you want to do an invisible join, you can just, when you work that last single crochet, you can just pull that through and then thread your yarn tail onto your needle. And then we're going to take a look for our very first single crochet that was made right here. There's the front of the single crochet. There's the top little V of our single crochet. So we're going to use this yarn tail and we're going to go underneath that single crochet. Or if you want to bring this in a little tighter, you can skip that single crochet and go into the next one. It's up to you how you want to do it. You can just try them both out and see which way looks the best. I'm going to try skipping that one to make this just a little tighter. So I'm going to go underneath the second single crochet here, and I'm not pulling it all the way tight because I want this line here because I'm simulating one of the crochet stitches, like a top of the stitch. And now I'm going to go back down from where my needle came, or from where my yarn tail came from, right there. And I'm going to go through just some of the bulk of the stitch. And then I'm going to see how that looks like kind of a loose stitch there. I'm going to tighten it up until it looks like one of the other stitches. And then it looks perfectly smooth. There's no kind of funny knot or bump there where you fasten off. It just looks really neat and tidy. This is definitely an optional thing to do. It's just a little detail that I like doing, especially if it's right along the edge of something that's kind of on the front. And this is right next to that linen stitch square, and I just feel like it makes it look a little bit nicer. All right, so then you can go ahead and just weave in all of your ends, and this piece can be blocked at this point. You could also block it before you seam it into a tube. I usually just wait into the end and then I just, wet block these if I'm using wool, or if I'm using acrylic, I will steam block it just to help everything relax and your stitches to kind of even out and look really nice. So then the last thing you would do before blocking, before you block, you're going to want to put the edging on the other side of the mitt. That's done in exactly the same way as I just did this edging. You can start with a slip knot on your hook and just do your first single crochet here, just how I showed you on that side. Work your way across the linen stitch square and into every row end and join at the end and weave in all those ends. So it's very simple. All right, I'm just going to check in here and see if I missed anything. Oh, I missed kind of a lot. Let's see. Okay, let me see here. Oh, we've got some suggestions. Okay, Molly says I use whichever way, crochet or seams that is more invisible. Yes, okay. Molly does not like to see her seams, and for a lot of projects I'm that way too. But sometimes there are exceptions, like when I'm doing something that looks decidedly patchworky to me, then I kind of enjoy seeing them. Julie says, I'd love to have a pair of fingerless mittens that had individual fingers crocheted in with just the fingertips missing. Okay, I've actually never designed a pair of those. I don't know why, but I'm going to put that on my list. Thank you, Julie, for that suggestion. And Moonrose Crafts is saying, it's numbers pictures I'm talking about in the granny square. I wonder if you're talking about, it's numbers pictures I'm talking about in granny square. I wonder if you're talking about this chart. I am still not quite sure I'm sorry, I still don't quite understand what it is you're asking. Molly says, oh, I love the Tannenbaum hat. So how about matching scarf, mittens, and cowl, etc.? Oh, thank you. A little while back, I did a holiday, like a Christmas project for those of you who are starting early, the Tannenbaum hat, and it's this really pretty hat with color work, and it's got, you know, fir trees all around it. It's really, it's got a good woodsy feel to it. Okay, all right, I will think about making some companion pieces for that. Somebody's wondering if I ever hurt my fingers and what did I do? I'm wondering if you're talking about just from crocheting, if I have any repetitive stress injuries. And for crochet, I almost never have that problem, weirdly. For knitting, it does happen to me and my hands cramp up. So I have to stop and take lots of breaks. And for me, it helps to like pull my hands back. But it's going to be, you know, everybody has different things that they need to do in order to kind of keep stretching out. But the best thing that I can say, or the best advice I can give you, is just to listen to your body, and when you're starting to cramp up and starting to ache, it's time to just take a walk or stretch or go do something else for a while. You know, if you push it too much, then it can make things not very good. Let's see. We have a hello from Argentina. Hello, welcome. And a hello from Quebec City, Canada. And Molly says fancy lacy shawl or wide scarf. Okay. These are great ideas, you guys. I appreciate this. Here's an idea. Sometimes it would be nice to have something quiet for babies to play with. Have you thought about making a little texture book? Oh, that would be fun. Different texture for each page of the book, and then connect the pages together in a book format. That would be that's a really good idea, like a little busy book kind of thing. Okay. Thank you, Renee, for that. And Moonrose Crafts is saying, second question, granny square sock. That is the same thing as what you're doing for the gloves. Oh, so maybe you're suggesting making a granny square sock that with the same stitch pattern as how I'm making the gloves? Or that would be interesting. Stitch. Okay. All right. Well, I hope I've answered all the questions. I know, Moonrose Crafts, I didn't quite answer your question about the corners. At least I don't think that I did. So I will think some more on that and try to figure that out. But I really appreciate you guys being here. These are always really fun live events. I have another live event coming up for those of you who, if you're a Craftsy Premium member or if you're a Creative Crochet Corner Gold member, that would be available for you guys to watch. That is at 11:30 today, so it's in about 20 minutes, Central Time, I should say. And I'm gonna be teaching how to make the structured basket here. Maybe you guys noticed this before, what I have all my yarn in today. So I'm gonna be doing a tutorial on that in just about 20 minutes. If any of you guys are those members, that you guys can join me, and I would love to have you there for that. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I super appreciate you guys saying hi and having all these great suggestions. I love that when you guys are active in the chat. It always makes me really happy. I hope you guys have a really great day. Thank you guys so much for joining. Bye.